time at Diddy's place. And apparently these gatherings at Diddy's were
Yeah.
known for a certain, shall we say, extravagant atmosphere.
Yeah.
Now, on the surface, this just seems like celebrity gossip. But it does make you think about the connections.
Yeah.
And the power dynamics. Who has access to these exclusive circles? What kind of relationships are happening there? And, how might those relationships translate into favors and influence?
So it's not even just about the parties, but who's there and what those connections might say about the unspoken rules of the whole industry. Like, what's expected from these artists, especially these new artists?
Exactly. It reminds me of this really interesting aspect of the early rap scene. It was this thing called checking in.
Checking in.
Yeah. Basically, it was a system, especially in the early days, where artists would pay their respects, let's just say that, to powerful local figures, to be able to perform in certain cities or venues. It was like a way to get protection, get a foot in the door, and maybe even avoid any unwanted attention.
Whoa. So this was like an unofficial dues-paying system, almost like a parallel economy happening alongside the music industry. Did it ever cross over into like actual extortion? Or was it more just unspoken rules?
Yeah, it was definitely a gray area, a lot of unspoken expectations. But it for sure highlights the power imbalances, especially for up-and-coming artists trying to make a name for themselves in such a competitive industry.
It's like you said, the system in the shadows and this connection with checking in. And what we're seeing maybe happening with Diddy, it brings up a lot of ethical questions. What kind of compromises might artists be pressured to make just to advance their career or even just survive in that world?
That's such a crucial point. You know the industry. With all its creativity and fame and financial stakes, it can create situations where the lines get blurred, and it really makes you question, consent and exploitation. Then what is the responsibility of these powerful figures to shape the culture of the industry?
It's getting a little heavy here. Speaking of Diddy, there were also those rumors about raids at his houses, right? Mm-hmm. What's the story there?
Yeah, according to the info we have, there are some allegations about things that might have happened at properties owned by Diddy. Now, it's really important to say these are allegations. And as of right now, he hasn't been formally charged with anything. But just the fact that these rumors exist, it's causing a lot of discussion and raising questions about his future.
This is serious. Do you think Diddy's career is over? I mean, between the potential legal trouble and this whole cancel culture thing, the industry seems really unforgiving.
It's hard to say for sure. These allegations are definitely damaging his image, and the industry is super sensitive to public opinion.
Yeah, the court of public opinion can be brutal, even without any formal legal action.
Yeah, for sure. On one hand, Diddy has this incredibly successful career and a huge network of supporters. But if these allegations are true, it could be really hard to bounce back. The consequences could range from legal action to basically disappearing from public life. We've seen this happen with other big names, like Russell Simmons, who moved to Bali after facing similar accusations.
Bali, wow. That's a big change. I guess a tropical island sounds pretty good when your world's falling apart. But wow, it really makes you think about the price of fame.
It does.
And the consequences of having that much power and influence.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even people at the top aren't above scrutiny or being held accountable. It really shows how important transparency and ethical conduct are, especially for people in positions of power.
This is a wild deep dive already. We went from talking about Saucy Santana's clothes to maybe witnessing the downfall of a music mogul.
It is interesting how one little thread can unravel into this whole tapestry of connections and power dynamics and ethics.
And we're not done yet. There's more to unpack, so stick with us as we keep going deeper into this world of the music industry.
It's a fascinating world.
It is.
That's for sure.
It is.
It really is such a complex industry. It's so easy to get caught up in the music, the artists, the trends. But there's this whole other layer going on beneath the surface that we don't really see.
Yeah, and this checking in thing is a perfect example of that. It really shows that for a lot of artists. Especially back then, it wasn't just about talent. They had to play by these unspoken rules and power structures just to survive.
Exactly. And those early days of hip-hop were especially crazy. It was like a musical Wild West.
Right.
Where artists had to learn this whole other set of rules if they wanted to make it.
It's like a shadow system running in parallel, with its own hierarchy and codes of conduct. Which makes me wonder, is this stuff still happening today? Or is it a thing of the past?
That's the big question, isn't it? These things thrive in secrecy. People aren't exactly going to openly admit to extortion or anything like that.
Right. It's all very hush-hush. But if we look at the bigger picture, the power imbalances in the music industry, and just in general, It's not crazy to think that this kind of stuff might still be happening in some way.
I agree. It's definitely something to think about. It raises the question of how do we address these issues as consumers and as a society? How do we create a system that actually protects artists, especially new artists who are more vulnerable to being taken advantage of?
That's so important. It's not just about uncovering these things. It's about stopping them from happening in the first place.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of transparency and accountability, not just in music, but in any field where there's power dynamics and money involved.
So what are some things that artists or people in the industry, or even just regular music fans, can do to address these issues?
Well, for artists, knowledge is power. Understanding contracts, knowing your rights, having a strong support system of managers, lawyers, people you trust, who have your best interests at heart, that's all crucial.
That's good advice for anyone starting out, really. Not even just in music. It's easy to get caught up in the moment and sign things without really understanding what it all means.
Yeah, and for industry professionals, it's about creating a culture where these behaviors aren't tolerated. Promoting transparency, ethical practices, holding people accountable when those lines are crossed.
So cleaning up the system from the inside.
Exactly. It's about shifting the power dynamics and making a more fair environment for everybody.
What about us regular music fans? Is there anything we can do?
I think the biggest thing for fans is being informed, supporting artists whose values you agree with, doing your research, asking questions like where is your money going? Who are you supporting with your streams and downloads? Those are all things to consider.
It's like voting with your wallet in a way.
Yeah.
Supporting artists and businesses that are doing things the right way.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to use your voice, to speak up against injustice. Hold the industry accountable, social media fan forums, even just conversations with friends. Those are all ways we can start conversations and raise awareness.
So it's a collective effort. Artists, industry people, and fans all working together.
Absolutely. We all have a part to play in shaping the kind of music industry we want.
I like that. It's empowering to know we're not just passive listeners, but we can actually make a difference.
Yeah, and that brings us back to Diddy. If these allegations are true, do you think this could be a turning point for the whole industry, a wake-up call that things need to change?
I think it could be. These big cases like this often have ripple effects. It forces the industry to look at itself and really reassess how things are done. Mm-hmm. It could be a catalyst for change.
It's like a test to see how committed the industry really is to transparency and accountability.
Exactly. The outcome of this whole situation could really change how these things are dealt with in the future.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
We've covered so much in this deep dive. From checking in back in the day to these allegations against Diddy. We've peeled back the layers and seen some of the darker parts of the industry.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder that there's always more to the story than we see on the surface. It's about being curious and asking questions.
Absolutely. Sometimes the toughest questions lead to the most interesting answers.
We're almost at the end of our deep dive. Stick with us as we wrap things up with some final thoughts about this complex world of the music industry. All right, we're back for the final part of our journey, behind the scenes of the music industry. And man, even after all of that, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
It's true. There's so much to this industry.
Yeah.
So many stories and dynamics, and there's always more to discover. But I think we've touched on some really key things today, like those hidden power structures, the ethical lines artists have to walk, and how easy it is for exploitation to happen in a system where who you know and the favors you can call in can make or break your career.
It's been pretty wild, hasn't it? From Saucy Santana's style to Diddy potentially losing it all, we've really gotten a glimpse into what drives this industry. And while it's easy to get caught up in the gossip, especially with someone like Diddy, I think it's important to step back and think about what it means for us as music fans.
Yeah, that's a great point. It challenges us to be more than just listeners, to be more aware of what we're supporting with our time and money, and to think about the kind of culture we're contributing to with our choices.
Because ultimately, what we do as fans, it has an impact. It shapes the industry.
Yeah.
And influences what kind of behavior gets rewarded.
Exactly. And that might mean looking into an artist's background a bit more, supporting those independent labels that are doing things right, or even just talking to your friends about these issues. It's all about being engaged and informed.
So it's not just about enjoying the music. It's about understanding the whole context, the systems at play behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Becoming a more empowered fan.
I love that. An empowered fan, someone who knows how the industry works and uses that knowledge to make good decisions and even speak up for change.
That's a great message for everyone listening today. You're not just along for the ride. You can actually make a difference in this industry.
You really can. And one last thing to think about.